Aren't they beautiful? So a couple of weeks ago, I busted out my big old stack of West Virginia ghost stories. I got some books on cryptids in here. I got some books on UFOs in here. I tried to bust out these books because it was, by my definition, officially fall. I saw my first orange leaf of the season, and I posted a picture of my big old stack of West Virginia paranormal literature, you might say. To which I was immediately greeted with the comment, "What a tremendous waste of time. Read a book to learn something that can actually help you in life. Ghost stories are BS and for children." I bet that guy's fun at parties, but how much actual history can you learn from West Virginia ghost story books? That's what today's episode is going to be all about. And National Batman Day was last week, so I'm going to go over 3 stories from one of my favorite books of all time, The Telltale Lilac Bush and Other West Virginia Ghost Tales by West Virginia's own Ruth Ann Music. Did a whole video on her. Definitely, I'm gonna have to stick a little doohickey for it up here. But I'm going to go over 3 stories from this book and just talk about some of the history behind some of West Virginia's most famous ghost stories. And if this goes over well, boy, do I have more books. We can do this for a while. I had a phone. Here's my phone. So the first ghost story that we're going to talk about is the Section South Main ghost story. It is the 70th ghost story in Telltale Lilac Bush. The story takes place in northern Marion County. Like with many of these books, most of the stories come from Marion County and the surrounding counties. In the town of Granttown. In the story, 6 miners are killed during an accidental explosion. After the explosion, the section is closed. But weird encounters keep happening to the miners as they pass the section of the mine. And many of these encounters involve these red lanterns that the mine stopped using shortly after this accident took place. In one of these encounters, 2 miners are actually taking a nap in one of the shacks near the mine when they hear footsteps outside, since they're not supposed to be sleeping on the job. The one quickly wakes up his friend and kind of peeks outside to see what's going on, in time to see 6 miners walking past the shack carrying these mysterious red lanterns that most of the miners knew they stopped using after this mine accident. To which one of the miners stops and says hello to the guy in Polish, at which he realized that it was his friend that was killed in the accident, and it was a ghost. Now, I haven't been able to make it to Granttown, but I have been able to make it to a town on the southern side of Marion County, one Mononga, West Virginia. Now, West Virginia is known for its coal industry, and during West Virginia statehood, there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of accidents and deaths related to the mining industry. But Mononga is a particularly sad case. On December 6th, 1907, an explosion ripped through the Fairmont Coal Company number 6 and number 8 mines. The single disaster killed at least 367 miners, but it was believed the number might be higher. At the time, it was customary for miners to bring their children with them because they were paid not by the pound, not by the hour. Basically, they had a quota they had to hit in order to get paid anything that day. So by bringing their children with them, maybe they could hit their quota after, 10 hours, 12 hours, and they wouldn't have to work a 16, 18-hour day. Because of this, it's believed that the total death count is probably closer to 400-ish. 367 official deaths, 170 were Italians. There's actually 3 Mononga mine disaster memorials in the world. One at Mononga's Mount Calvary Cemetery. The other 2 are actually located in Italy. Also, the Mononga Mine Memorial in Mononga wasn't put there by the state of West Virginia. It was actually paid for and donated by the country of Italy. The one thing that will probably catch your attention as I put some pictures up of the Mount Calvary Cemetery is how many identical or semi-identical monuments there are. Most of them have writing on them in Italian, and almost all of them have the same deceased date of December 6th, 1907. Maybe one day I'll actually be able to go and see the other 2 Mononga Mine disaster memorials in Italy. Now, the coal industry isn't the only dangerous career path in West Virginia. The railroad industry, and to some extent even the lumber industry, also had their fair share of tragedies and accidents. And the next story we're going to talk about is number 78 in Telltale Lilac Bush, the Board Tree Tunnel. So in this story, it's actually about a guy named Billy Hogan up until the point where he gets hit by the first train to go through the Board Tree Tunnel. But his story doesn't end there, because he continues to follow around a friend of his, an Irishman named Packy Hendricks. And Hendricks starts telling stories about working alongside Billy's ghost. He can tell when Billy's having a good day because Billy will follow him around, tell him stories, tell him about weak spots in the tunnel ceiling and stuff so that he can repair them. But he can tell when Billy's having a bad day because he will have a hard time finding his tools, he'll have a hard time keeping his lantern lit, and there's just general other minor misfortunes that befalls Packy whenever Billy's in a bad mood. Now, the Board Tree Tunnel is 100% real. It's located just off Route 250 in between 100 and Cameron, actually just outside the town of Littleton. The area was once known for its thriving Irish community. In fact, it once had its own Catholic church and cemetery due to this large Irish population. Accidental deaths were common during the construction of the tunnel. Also during the construction process, there was an outbreak of cholera which killed many of the workers and also some of their family members. And many of the individuals killed in the construction of the tunnel and this cholera outbreak are actually buried in a cemetery atop McGuffey Ridge. Because let's be honest, if you're going to put an Irish cemetery somewhere, I think you're kind of legally required that the road has Mick in the name of it somewhere. So for this last story, we've talked about Italian West Virginians. We've talked about Irish West Virginians. But Telltale Lilac Bush actually has an entire section of foreign ghost stories. And the one we're going to cover is number 98, back towards the very end of the book, called Draga's Return. And I remember this story from way, way, way back as a little kid. It's always been one of my favorite stories. The story comes from Yugoslavia, which is like 7 different countries now. I mean, R.I.P. Yugoslavia. You had a good run. The story is about one Draga Vilic? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Draga Vilic, who after his death would return to haunt his wife at night. Basically, while she was trying to sleep, he would just kind of rise up out of the grave and wrap his cold, dead arms around his wife. After several nights of this, she actually contacted a priest who advised her to tie some string around Draga's arm when he comes to play the big spoon. And the next day, after she tied some string around his arm, they go to his grave. There's a piece of string sticking up out it, and the priest says, cool, take a giant stake, impale him. That will keep him from rising up out of the grave. It's almost a vampire story. And this is important. In the early part of the 20th century, people came from all over Europe to work in the mines, the lumber mills, and on the railroad in West Virginia. They brought their folklore and their customs and their ghost stories with them. And while they were here, they shared their folklore and their ghost stories with other communities, other people they worked with who might not have been from where they're from. You might have Eastern Europeans interacting with the Irish. You might have the Germans interacting with Scandinavians. You might have, in some cases, Italians and Greeks interacting with African Americans who moved north to West Virginia to escape some of the policies of the South. And these people, they took their stories that they heard from their co-workers, from their friends, back to their families, and they shared it with them. And that is why West Virginia has such a diverse and such a great foundation of folklore and ghost stories. Is because they were adapted, they were retold. So that is why West Virginia has such a rich history of folklore and ghost stories. And they're great for getting general concepts and ideas of history out there. A lot of people might be intimidated to just open up a history book because all you're going to get pounded with are names, dates, locations, while ghost stories and folklore then get more concepts of history out there. And there's going to be maybe a little bit of foundational truth in there. Like all these ghost stories, except for Draga's Return, have actual places that you can point to and go, oh yeah, that's right, 2 hours north. That's, 45 minutes that way. Most of these stories were coming from an hour, 2 hours of where I grew up, and that was amazing. And I don't think I ever would have gotten the interest in history and the love of history that I've developed over the years if it wasn't for these ghost stories that I read and fell in love with and still love. If this is something you enjoy and you'd like to see me do some more stories like this, if you'd like to see me go to some more cemeteries, hopefully you've liked some of the pictures I put up here, definitely show some love for this video. If you haven't subscribed yet, do that. But until next time, don't forget to stay wild, stay wonderful, have yourself a nice hot beverage. Okay, that's a little bit cold. It's been out for a while, but still, I'll talk to you later.